Hi, welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. Retirement is supposed to be your golden years, right? But for many retirees, the transition period into retirement can be a very stressful and confusing time. This is especially true for couples who don't retire at the same time or have a big difference in their ages. On today's program, I'll be joined by licensed psychologist Dr. Dorian Mintzer, an expert on the subject. Stick around. And welcome back. So glad to have you with us, and I'm super excited. I'll try to contain myself on today's program to welcome back to the program and to our studio here in Daytona Beach, Dr. Dorian Mintzer. She is a Ph.D., of course, but also a licensed psychologist and has done this work for many, many years. So I'm going to be talking with her about retirement transition issues, and we've had you on the program before. Dory, welcome back.
Thank you. It's wonderful being back again.
Thank you. And we ran out of time. We were counting down the top 10 retirement transition topics or things to talk about, and we didn't get to all of them. So, but before I jump into it again, I'm always anxious to get started. You've done this work for a long time. I think the last time we were together, you shared with me 4 decades.
4 decades of my clinical work. I got my first degree, a master's in social work, actually, in 1970.
Wow. And with all of that experience, I know you've also written a book, The Couple's Retirement Puzzle.
10 must-have conversations for creating an amazing new life together.
All right, and you co-wrote that with Roberta Taylor.
I did.
Another person I'll need to get on the program. So in that work, and I know that you do focus groups, you work with couples and individuals, and in that work, you've seen some of these consistent, recurring themes or issues or considerations or challenge, call them what you want to in terms of these issues, and those are some of the things I'd love for us to be able to continue to talk about and share with our audience. So the last time together, we went through the top 5, so if you missed that, make sure you go and see that program as well, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to pick up where we left off and turn to a subject that a lot of people say, wait a minute, am I on the wrong channel? This is supposed to be a financial show. But number 6 on your list is intimacy and romance. Again, part of this retirement transition. So do tell, how does that fit into this retirement puzzle?
Because it's a very important part of it. I mean, if you think about it, we are our minds and our bodies. And we come into the world and how important touch is, and throughout our entire life, touch, intimacy, sexuality are all very important. So whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship, it's not all downhill. I know there's some myths about getting older.
Sure. And
there's a lot of internalized ageism that people have, thinking that it's all downhill, but there's a real paradigm shift that's happening. And I think it's important to recognize that's in relation to sexuality and intimacy also.
Right.
You know, there's a book I remember seeing a few years ago that it said sex after 60, and you open it and it was blank. That is not the case, people. Listen, it is not the case.
Okay.
Because sexuality is important, and intimacy and romance is important. And, you know, we're not in our 70s or 80s or 90s who we were when we were 20 or 30.
Sure.
But if you recognize that sensuality, sexuality is important, you know, intercourse is not everything, that there are different ways of experiencing and showing pleasure to whomever you're with.
Sure.
And I think it's important to recognize it. And it's a topic, I think money, sex, and death tend to be taboos in our country.
Definitely.
But it's so important to talk about it.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily the case around the world, is it?
No,
other cultures are very different about those subjects.
Yeah. And you know, some of the issues around the sexuality that I think is important is so often older people are sort of embarrassed to bring up issues with their doctors.
Right.
And doctors often don't want to ask questions because it's like,
they
may be the age of the doctor's parents or grandparents.
right.
It's like, oh, they don't do that.
They don't want to talk about
they don't want
that.
to talk about it. But what's important, the other part I want to really stress too, is that the over 50 population, there's a high rise in sexually transmitted diseases because people often think, oh, you don't have to worry about anything because you're not worried about getting pregnant.
Right.
You do need to be
Sure.
careful and check on that. And it's an important part of life, and I think that we sort of think it's not. And some people are in long-term relationships, and actually many people say it just gets better and better because you know each other, there's less pressure on you, and sometimes people are more experimentative. And the over 50 population does have a high divorce rate.
Well, that's why this is,
Right.
the audience is waiting for me is to
I
tie
know.
this to financial. There is a trend in what's called graying of divorce. And if there is not intimacy or there is not this communication that you're speaking to, then there is certainly a higher probability of a divorce, and the financial impact of that, of course, is devastating and is highly disruptive. It is a bull in a china store because of all the financial implications.
Absolutely. And some of the studies are saying that part of why it's happening more is that people, knowing that they're going to live longer, say, I don't want to be in an unhappy relationship for the next 40 years.
Right.
And there are more and more women in the labor market who aren't as financially dependent on their
Which is a wonderful
spouses.
thing.
Right.
Yeah, I'll put up with him for a couple of years, but a 40-year retirement, he's going to live too long. No way.
In fact, last time when we were talking about time together and time apart,
Right.
If couples, when you think about it, work provides time together and time apart.
Sure.
And I remember you saying the last time that we spoke that, it can be like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into to both be home all the time? That's why it's important to figure out, what you want to do separately, but also maybe some of the things you want to do together.
That's right. And there needs to be a balance that my mom always reminds me, and she watches the show. Hi, Mom. So she always reminds me that there needs to be a balance, and not just between the couple, but also within yourself, that you have a balance. And she'll always say, I feel like I'm out of balance. I need to get a little bit more back in balance.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah.
And it's important both individually as well as in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's all part of the puzzle. I remember last time I was here, I talked and put it in the frame, and part of the frame that I really like is it is a puzzle. There are all these parts that fit together in different ways, and they're unique to you and your situation.
The same
but
is true
they
for
impact each other.
Yeah, and the same is true with the planning part of this, because one of the things that I've recognized, and I'm sure you would agree, Dory, is that it's really a three-dimensional puzzle. It's not as simple as just putting it on the table, and it's three-dimensional. It's got so many different angles, and then it becomes fourth-dimensional because now we got to think about it going through time.
That's right.
And so all of this relates, and you spoke to the next one, I think, which is really important, and that is the family element. So when my parents retired, they did a lot of traveling. They got a home in North Carolina. They did traveling. They both explored the things they wanted to do. Right. But then, of course, there were some family obligations because I was in the same community, and my brother, and then also when I started my own family, they had to recognize as part of their retirement was the relationship with me and my family.
Yep. It's a very important area, so that the communication, the conversations aren't just with your partner if you have one. Mm-hmm. It's very important to have some of these difficult conversations, or they can be difficult, with your adult children, with your grandchildren, depending on how old they are, because you may have certain expectations of what you want from them, and they may have expectations of what they want for you, and they may not be on the same page. Yeah. And in addition, there's so many changing demographics now. So as we were just saying, there are more divorce, sometimes people remarrying. There may be the blended families, if they're children, yours, mine, ours. There may be no children, there may be no grandchildren. There may be people who've decided that they want to live together and not get married.
Right.
It's a whole different ball game, I guess, is
And
what
all
it's
of those
called.
things have potential, of course, areas or sources of conflict.
Exactly.
I'm just going out on a limb here, Dory.
No, absolutely, and it ties into the financial.
Of
I mean,
course.
it may be issues of, how much money for the children or grandchildren for college. Who are we going to be able to count on to help us, if anybody?
Exactly.
Or what other safety nets do we need to kind of build in for ourselves? There can be a lot of conflict around that. And even if it's a long-term marriage, there still can be conflict about, well, I want money to go to my alma mater, and I want money to go to my children. And they're very important conversations to have. And
I deal with this and address this on a weekly basis.
I'm sure that you
all
do,
the time
yeah.
with existing clients or prospective clients.
Right.
This is part of the conversation, and it needs to be candid. And it's one of the reasons why I always insist that if I'm working with a person who's in a couple relationship, I always say, they both need to be involved, because we need to make sure we get all this put together. And I can't tell you how many times that I've put the financial picture up on the screen, and one of the members of the couple goes, "Oh,
Look at that.
look at all that." So, well, and I mentioned my parents having they bought the home in North Carolina. We did have conversations about that after about 20 years. They went up in the summer and spent the summer, and then we talked about it, and they decided to sell it, and now they're full-time in the local market where I live. But that conversation wasn't something important we needed to have. And so couples number 8 on our list is, where do you want to live? How do you want to live? And how are you going to pay for it? If you're going to have that second home, that's going to have some cost. If you're going to rent or you're going to travel, all of these things have costs, and they need to be built into the overall financial plan.
And even if you want to stay where you are, there may be costs to make the house more accessible as your needs change.
Sure.
It's part of where that puzzle, I think, is so important. And I do think that the finances underpin a lot of it. But the where do I want to live can be a big, difficult conversation too, because people don't always see eye to eye. Maybe I want to live near the children or grandchildren. Well, I want to live in Florida and play golf.
Friends and golf and grandchildren and
Right.
different weather, and I don't really want to shovel snow when I'm 70 years
Right.
old. I mean, there are these
Right.
inherent conflicts. And the thing I've seen is often, not always, but often when one of the spouses passes away, we see a change.
Yes.
And so we see either a relocating to be closer next to family,
Right.
or just something, I've always wanted to live wherever, and now I can.
Right. And the point that you've just made, I think, is important too, that you may start out planning for this next phase of life in a relationship if you're in one, but the reality is women are still outliving men, although the gap is lessening a little bit. And it depends on the ethnic groups,
lot of
too.
factors.
There are a lot of factors that are at work. But if you think about the where you want to live, some of the options, there's so many more options now than our parents' generation. There's continuing care retirement communities.
Sure.
Which provide community at the same time as a place to live, which
And security and
safety.
safety.
Security and safety. And so I see sometimes people decide, well, I'm not so sure I'm really old enough that I want it now, but I want to move in while we're both healthy, so that when one or the other dies, the other person has a community and wants to be there. There's the village model. I don't know if your viewers have heard of it, but it started actually in my area, in Beacon Hill in Massachusetts, and it's now been replicated around the country. And it's a movement that helps people age in place. So you pay a certain yearly fee, and it varies, I think, in each community, but there are services that are provided. They often vet the maintenance people and contractors and all, if you need to have
Nice.
work done where you live. And there's support systems built in.
Wonderful.
There's also faith-based programs through churches and synagogues that often have caring committees that help people who are more isolated. But I think what's important in terms of deciding where to live is to think about what the criteria are. For some people, it's wanting to be where I can be outside and walking, as you said, not wanting to, to have the cold weather. It may also be wanting to be near airports so that it's easy to
Travel
see
and-
children and traveling. It may be important to be near hospitals
Right,
and
right.
your medical.
And your particular care needs.
And your
maybe where they
particular-
specialize or.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also there's this whole concept of lifelong learning.
Right.
And which, I think it's important to think about keeping your mind and body alive. And so some people want to live like in university communities.
College town.
Like here.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Daytona Beach is not a bad place to
Right,
retire.
Right.
That's very good, Dory. I think for people, probably the big takeaway for me whenever you and I get a chance to talk is that there's so much interwoven complexity and important topics, but even though they can be a little complex, the more you talk about them, the easier it gets, and the more, of course, we can be clear about some of the decisions we need to make. And so I'm so glad you could come and be with us again, Dory.
Yeah,
Dr. Dorian Mintzer, ladies and gentlemen, our guest today, author of The Couples Retirement Puzzle. Glad you came and visited us here in Daytona Beach and traveling from Boston, Massachusetts. So you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. I would love to come back another time. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Dory.
Thank you.
Once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far away, variable annuities were uncomplicated and relatively inexpensive financial vehicles offering investment diversification, death benefits, and tax advantages. The year was 1998. A year prior, I had started my own financial firm, Holland Financial. At the time, I recommended, when appropriate, a variable annuity as part of an overall financial plan to my clients. The variable annuities I recommended cost about the same as charging the client a fee to manage their accounts. It worked and made sense. Fast forward about a dozen years or so to 2010, variable annuities had become increasingly complicated and more expensive. A proliferation of optional riders and benefits made them cost a lot more for investors, and sometimes more confusing to the investors. And now today, I routinely see variable annuities loaded up with all sorts of riders and optional features, and the total fees can reach 4.5% to 5% per year. From some perspective on that, the average mutual fund costs 1.5%, according to Lipper Research. Also, for comparison, hiring an investment advisor will cost you 1% to 2% per year, depending on the size of your account and how it's being managed. Perhaps in some situations, the extra benefits provided are worth the extra fees. Perhaps. Unfortunately, most of the time, the investor does not know or grossly underestimates the total cost of their variable annuity. This lack of knowledge results from either, 1, the product was poorly explained by the broker recommending it. 2, the broker didn't understand the product themselves. 3, the client didn't understand what was being told to them. And 4, the client doesn't remember what the total fees are and doesn't have a document that explains the fees to them. Oh, sure, the fees are disclosed in that prospectus, that inch-thick document written by attorneys for attorneys in microscopic font. Nobody reads these documents, and everybody knows that in the financial industry. Aside from the higher costs and the fact that the variable annuity owner doesn't know their fees, my other big beef with today's variable annuities is that they often come with income guarantees of some sort. While the idea of securing a guarantee of income is attractive to many investors and to financial advisors, the way these income features work and are explained to the investor often leads them to incorrectly believe that they are earning an annual return of 6% or more. This is false. There's no variable annuity that guarantees a 6% return in today's interest rate environment. Quite frankly, I'm tired of seeing the shock and dismay on people's faces when I reveal the truth to them about what they've got, which is very different from what they thought. Here again, the misunderstanding is due in part to the complexity of today's variable annuity products, and what must be, at least some of the time, poor communication between brokers and their customers. Unfortunately, I see this situation often, way too often. This seriously flawed misunderstanding about the safety and earning of variable annuities can cause some real long-term problems for investors. If you base your financial and retirement decisions on incorrect assumptions, problems are likely to arise later. Let me put this more bluntly. If you believe your variable annuity is earning 6% annually, you better go back to your broker for an explanation or get a second opinion from another advisor. Likewise, if you don't know what your fees are on any investment you make, you need to find out one way or another. I know this is a heavy subject, and a little complicated. Call me an optimist, but I believe retirement planning doesn't have to be hard, complicated, or stressful. If you've accumulated assets for retirement, you've done the hard part. The planning and selection of the proper mix of investments and financial strategies is easy by comparison. I could be the best financial planner in the world, but I can't do much to alter the reality of someone who has only been able to save $10,000 for retirement. If you've saved a significant amount of money for retirement, congratulations. Believe me, you've done the hardest part. So where does this leave us on variable annuities? The product is not inherently flawed. The problem is in poor communication and complexity. And ladies and gentlemen, that is why I'm talking about these financial products on the viewer question segment of this program. I get questions about annuities all the time. A week doesn't go by when I haven't given somebody a second opinion on what they've got, how it works, and what it costs. If you have a variable annuity or are thinking of getting one, I strongly encourage you to get all the fees in writing before you sign up. And a prospectus ain't gonna cut it. Ask for a separate one-page summary of all fees and expenses and ask the broker and his or her branch manager to sign it. And one more time, if you think you've got a variable annuity earning a 6% guaranteed return each year, you are mistaken, you've forgotten, or you've been misled. Get a second opinion from a qualified financial advisor to confirm how your specific product works. I don't think you'll regret taking the time to be sure you understand what you've invested in. Okay? Okay. And remember, if you've got a question you'd like me to answer on this program, shoot me an email and I'll be glad to do it. Thank you. Before you go, I want to share a few thoughts on May-December couples. If you're not familiar with the term, it's another way to refer to a couple with a significant age difference. As you might expect, a big age difference between couples in a financial relationship can create a variety of extra challenges. For example, May-December couples will need to look beyond their Social Security statements to make the most of their retirement benefits. There's no one-size-fits-all strategy. A significant age difference between spouses can create confusion on when to start Social Security benefits. Here's an example. John, age 65, Mary, age 50. We're just married. Both expect to live until age 90. But let's say that John's projected benefits at his normal retirement age of 66 is $2,000 per month, while Mary's is $500 at her normal retirement age of 67. If John waits 5 years to start his benefits at age 70, he would get $3,015 a month. If Mary starts at age 62, she would get $926, which would be partly based on John's higher earning record. The newlyweds could enjoy an extra $151,000 in benefits over their lifetimes by optimizing their Social Security elections versus drawing on their benefits at the earliest opportunity. Naturally, there's some pitfalls that May-December couples need to plan and prepare for. A shorter remaining lifespan of the elder spouse could pose a serious financial risk to the younger spouse with little of his or her own projected benefits. In my example, if John dies before he and Mary have been married 9 months, Mary, his widow, wouldn't be entitled to John's Social Security benefits. Likewise, if they divorced before a full 10 years of marriage, Mary would not be entitled to John's Social Security benefit, whether he's alive or not. In either scenario, unless she remarries, Mary's retirement benefit at 62 would only be about $456 on her own earning record. So, what do? Plan, of course. A customized retirement income plan can assemble and direct investments and other personal resources in a way that makes the most of Social Security benefits and helps address the financial challenges of May-December marriages. Every situation is different, but there's certain key information that needs to be considered, like assumptions we make about inflation and life expectancy, the length of the current and any prior marriages, the value of IRAs, investments, home equity, and other assets, and the last thing, current and other sources of future income. And I'm not just talking about chronological age, but real health age. Let's change the scenario a little bit and say that a married couple are both 60, but the husband has a history of health issues and his family's longevity is short, with most of his ancestors dying by age 75. if his wife is healthy, and her family typically lives to age 100, then we're talking about at least a 10-year period when the wife will be on her own and need financial resources to see her to the end. Yes, planning takes some time. And no, most financial planners don't have a drive-through window. But if you do take the time, you know what I'm going to say. You'll plan stronger. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.